This 4-year-old beggar girl cries with a trash bag in her arms. But a millionaire opens the bag, and when they discover what's inside, everyone is shocked. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The scorching midday sun beat down on the dusty streets of Harmony Creek, Ohio, when a touching scene caught the eye of passers-by in the town square. A little girl, only 6 years old, walked with difficulty, carrying a black trash bag that seemed to weigh much more than her frail little body. Iris Santos had a face smudged with dirt and tears, but her green eyes sparkled with a determination that contrasted with her fragile appearance. Her torn and faded clothes told the story of a hard life, but it was the way she hugged that plastic bag that drew the most attention. It wasn't the hug of someone carrying trash, it was the hug of someone protecting a treasure. With each faltering step, she adjusted the weight in her thin arms, murmuring soft words as if she were talking to the contents. Across the square, observing the typical bustle of an ordinary afternoon in his hometown, was Cassius Cass Drummond. At 52, the mining magnate had returned to Harmony Creek after months away, tending to the business that had made him one of the wealthiest men in the region. Tall, with neatly trimmed grey hair and expensive clothes that contrasted with the simple surroundings, Cass was a figure who stood out completely from the scenery. He had grown up on those same streets decades ago, when his family was still struggling to survive. Now owner of a thriving mining company, he rarely visited the town where it all began. But something about that afternoon had brought him back. Perhaps nostalgia, perhaps the need to reconnect with his roots. It was then that his eyes fixed on the girl. Iris stopped in the middle of the square, placed the bag on the ground, and wiped away her tears with the back of her dirty hand. The contrast between the child's fragility and the weight she carried awakened something in Cass's chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity, compassion, an unease he couldn't explain. Without much thought, he crossed the square in her direction. Iris saw him approaching and instinctively hugged the bag tighter, as if fearing that someone would take it from her. Her big eyes watched him with a mixture of fear and defiance that deeply touched the businessman's heart. "Are you all right, little one?" Cass asked, crouching down to be at the girl's height. His voice, normally firm and authoritative in business meetings, came out soft and careful. Iris studied him for a moment, assessing whether she could trust this well-dressed man. She had learned early to distrust strangers, but something in his eyes reassured her slightly. "It's not trash," she said finally, squeezing the bag against her chest. "They're Grandma Della's treasures." The answer intrigued Cass even more. Treasures? Her memories? The photos? The letters she kept? The pretty embroidery? Iris's voice trembled. "The landlord said we had to leave the house today, and I could only save this." Cass's heart clenched. An eviction notice. He knew these situations well. He had witnessed many during his poor childhood. But seeing such a small child facing this alone awakened an anguish that he had buried years ago under layers of business success and emotional isolation. "Can I see?" he asked gently, extending his hand. Iris hesitated, but something in the man's sincere expression made her trust him. Slowly, she opened the bag and allowed him to look inside. What Cass saw left him speechless. Dozens of carefully folded handwritten letters, old black and white photographs, small personal items organized with care, sewing thimbles, colored ribbons, an antique brooch, pieces of fabric with delicate embroidery. Everything was arranged with the care of someone who keeps what they love most in the world. "Where is your grandmother now?" Cass asked, feeling a lump in his throat. "She went to try to find a place for us to sleep tonight," Iris replied, wiping away more tears. "She said I had to stay here waiting, taking care of her treasures." At that moment, a 67-year-old woman approached hurriedly. Della Santos was a small woman, white hair tied in a simple bun, modest but clean clothes. Her brown eyes, identical to her granddaughter's, shone with tears of relief at seeing Iris. "My girl, you gave me such a scare," she said, hugging the child. It was then that she noticed Cass crouching beside them, observing the scene with a pensive expression. Della immediately went on the defensive, placing Iris behind her. She had spent her entire life protecting her granddaughter and distrusted anyone who approached, especially well-dressed men who seemed to have money. "Do you need something, sir?" she asked, her voice full of suspicion. Cass stood up slowly, realizing the tension in the situation. "Sorry to bother you. I was just talking to your granddaughter. She told me about your situation." Della's face closed even more. "We don't need anyone's pity." "It's not pity," Cass said calmly. "I have a property on the outskirts of town. There's a small house there that's not being used. You could stay there for a while until you get organized." The offer caught Della completely off guard. On the one hand, the desperate situation. She hadn't been able to find any place to spend the night with her granddaughter. On the other, years of independence and pride made her reject any kind of favor. "Why would a man like you help people like us?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. Cass was silent for a moment, searching for an answer that he himself couldn't fully explain, because we all need help sometimes. Iris took her grandmother's hand and looked at her with pleading eyes. "Grandma, I'm hungry and tired." Della looked at her granddaughter, then at the well-dressed man in front of her, then at the bag of memories that represented everything that remained of a lifetime. The reality was cruel. They had no choice. "And what will you want in return?" she asked, her voice full of suspicion. "Nothing," Cass replied simply. Della didn't believe it. No one helped without wanting something in return. But as the shadows of the afternoon lengthened and fatigue took over Iris's body, she realized that she might have no choice but to accept that mysterious offer. What none of the three knew at that moment was that chance encounter in the dusty town square of Harmony Creek would change their lives in ways they could never have imagined. Cass's rural property was 10 miles from downtown Harmony Creek, accessible by a dirt road that wound through hills covered with typical Ohio vegetation. During the journey in the luxury car, Iris remained glued to the window, observing the landscape with wide eyes, while Della kept the bag of belongings firmly embraced, distrust etched in every line of her aged face. "I've never been in such a fancy car," Iris whispered, gently touching the leather upholstery. "It's soft like the fabric Grandma uses to make special embroidery." Cass observed the girl's innocence through the rearview mirror and felt a strange pang in his chest. For 5 years, since he lost his wife Mirtes in a car accident on a rainy night, he had built high walls around his heart. Work, business, profits. And these were the only things he allowed to occupy his thoughts. Children always made him uncomfortable, unable to know how to act or what to say. The house where he took them was simple but well built, with 2 bedrooms, a small living room, kitchen and bathroom. It had originally been built for a caretaker who hadn't stayed long on the job. Furnished in a basic way, it was clean and in good condition. "Here we are," Cass announced, stopping the car in front of the white-walled, red-roofed house. Della got out of the vehicle with slow movements, still processing the surreal situation. The house was better than any place she had lived in for the last few years. Iris ran to the small porch, her eyes shining with enchantment. "Grandma, look, there's a hammock," she exclaimed, pointing to the hammock stretched in a corner of the porch. "You can stay as long as you need," Cass said, handing the keys to Della. "There's food in the pantry and refrigerator. If you need anything, my main house is about a mile away, following the path." Della took the keys with trembling hands, still unable to believe it. "Why are you doing this? What's your real interest?" The direct question hit Cass head on. He himself couldn't fully explain the impulse that had led him to help. Maybe it was the memory of his own difficult childhood, or maybe something in the determination of that small girl carrying the weight of the world in her arms. "There's no interest," he replied, avoiding the old woman's penetrating gaze. "Just make yourselves at home." After Cass left, Della and Iris explored the house in silence. It was like a dream: running water, electricity, a stove that worked, a refrigerator with food. Iris discovered a window in the living room that overlooked a small garden where some flowers resistant to the dry climate grew. "Grandma, can we plant some seeds there?" she asked, pointing to a small patch of dirt next to the house. "I don't know how long we're going to stay here, my flower," Della replied, carefully opening the bag with her belongings. "This man might change his mind at any moment." That night, for the first time in months, Iris slept in a real bed. Della stayed awake for hours, watching through the window, waiting for someone to appear to kick them out or demand some kind of payment. Her life experience had taught her that nothing in life was free, especially when it came from wealthy people. The next morning, Iris woke up early and found her grandmother in the kitchen preparing coffee. With the supplies that Cass had left, the girl noticed that Della had spread some of her memories on the table: old photographs, letters yellowed by time, and some fabrics with delicate embroidery. "Grandma, tell me again about these photos," Iris asked, climbing onto a chair to see better. Della smiled for the first time since they arrived. "This one is of your grandfather, my John. He died when you were 2 years old. You don't remember him. And this is of our old house, where I was born and raised." Iris delicately touched a photograph that showed a simple but welcoming house, with a flowered garden in front. "Was it really ours?" "It belonged to my father, Joe Santana's family, but we lost everything when I was young. Debts, problems we couldn't solve." Della's voice carried an old sadness. "Since then, we've always lived on handouts, renting. We've never had a place that was really ours again." Iris observed the sadness in her grandmother's eyes, and, with the peculiar wisdom of children, changed the subject. "And this embroidery. Here? It's the prettiest of all." Della picked up a piece of fabric embroidered with flowers and birds in vibrant colors. "This is a Richelieu embroidery, an old technique that my mother taught me. Few people know how to do it like this nowadays." "Can you teach me?" "Of course, my flower. But first, I need to get new thread and needles." It was at that moment that they heard the sound of a car approaching. Della stiffened immediately, quickly gathering the belongings from the table. Iris ran to the window and saw the same luxury car from the day before. "It's the kind man," she announced, waving from the window. Cass got out of the car carrying 2 shopping bags. He was wearing more casual clothes than the day before, but still contrasted completely with the rural environment. When Della opened the door, he noticed the tension in her face. "I brought some things that I thought you might need," he said, showing the bags. "Fruits, vegetables, some cleaning supplies." "I already said we don't need charity," Della replied dryly, but Iris had already run to him. "Thank you, sir. Grandma was saying that she needed thread to teach me embroidery," said the girl with the typical spontaneity of children. Cass looked at Della, who turned red with embarrassment. "Embroidery? Grandma knows how to make beautiful embroidery. She showed me the photos of the ones she's already done," continued Iris, completely ignoring her grandmother's embarrassment. "Iris, don't bother the gentleman with these things," Della scolded, but Cass became genuinely interested. "You work with embroidery?" "I used to," Della corrected, "when I had orders. But nowadays few people value this type of work." "And does it pay?" Della laughed bitterly. "When there's someone to buy it, yes. But it's hard to find someone who values it." At that moment, an idea began to germinate in Cass's mind, an idea that he didn't yet fully understand, but that intrigued him deeply. Meanwhile, Iris watched the two adults talking and felt that something important was happening, something that could change their lives again. The following weeks brought a strange but comforting routine for Della and Iris. Cass appeared almost every day, always with some excuse, checking if they needed anything, bringing supplies, or simply talking. What surprised Della the most was how he seemed genuinely interested in the embroideries and the story behind each piece. Iris had adapted to the new life with the ease typical of children. She explored every corner of the property, discovered colorful insects, collected pretty stones and wildflowers. But what enchanted her the most were the conversations with Cass. Unlike the adults she knew, he really listened to what she had to say, asked questions about her drawings, and was interested in her little discoveries. "Mr. Cass, look what I found!" Iris exclaimed one afternoon, running to him with a smooth, shiny stone in her hands. "Grandma Della said it looks like a heart." Cass examined the stone seriously, as if it were an important scientific discovery. "It really does look like a heart. Where did you find it?" "Near the creek. There are lots of pretty stones there. Can I start a collection?" "Of course you can. How about I bring you a little box to keep your treasures in?" Iris's face lit up. "A little box just for me?" Observing the interaction, Della felt contradictory feelings. On one hand, she was happy to see her granddaughter so excited. On the other, a constant anxiety tormented her. When would it all end? When would Cass get tired of them and send them away? It was during one of these visits that Cass made a proposal that caught Della completely off guard. "I have an idea," he said, watching Della work on a new embroidery. "What if we organized an exhibition of your work in town?" Della stopped embroidering and looked at him as if he had gone crazy. "Exhibition? What for?" "To show people the quality of your work, to value this traditional art of the region." Cass became animated as he spoke. "I know people who appreciate fine crafts. Tourists visit Harmony Creek looking for authenticity, local culture. No one would be interested in the embroideries of an old woman like me," Della said, returning to work. "Yes, they would. You don't see the value of what you do." Iris, who was drawing on the floor with colored chalk that Cass had brought, looked up. "I think everyone should see Grandma's embroideries. They're the prettiest in the world." The child's innocence touched Cass deeply. In recent years, he had become accustomed to a world where everything revolved around profit and competition. The purity of Iris's love for her grandmother and Della's artistic dedication were awakening in him feelings that he had buried along with Myrte's. "At least think about the idea," he insisted. That night, after Cass had left, Della was restless. The proposal had stirred her more than she would like to admit. For years, no one had valued her work beyond ordering a towel here, an embroidery there. The idea of an exhibition was both exciting and terrifying. "Grandma, why don't you want to show your embroideries to people?" Iris asked, climbing into bed next to her grandmother. "Because I'm afraid, my flower." "Afraid of what?" "That people won't like them, of being embarrassed." Della hugged her granddaughter. "When you're poor, it seems like everything you do is worthless. But your embroideries are pretty. Mr. Cass said they're extraordinary." "He's being kind, that's why he says that." "No, Grandma, he was serious. I saw it in his eyes." 2 days later, something unexpected happened. Cass arrived accompanied by an elegant woman, about 45 years old, with neatly cut blonde hair and expensive clothes. Della immediately went on alert. She recognized the type. "This is my sister, Natalie," Cass introduced. "Natalie, these are Della and Iris." Natalie Drummond was a lawyer in Columbus, ambitious and used to getting what she wanted. She had driven to Harmony Creek as soon as she heard about her brother's new obsession. Her eyes scanned the simple house and fixed on the two women with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "So you're my brother's Guests, she said, forcing a cold smile. Temporary ones, Della corrected quickly, sensing the disguised hostility. Iris, always spontaneous, approached Natalie. Are you Mr. Cass's sister? You don't look much alike. Iris! Della scolded, mortified. But Natalie laughed, a sound without warmth. Children always tell the truth, don't they? During the visit, Natalie observed everything with calculating eyes. She saw how her brother interacted with the girl, how interested he was in Della's embroideries, how he seemed different. In 5 years of closed mourning, it was the first time she had seen. Cass showed genuine interest in something other than work. Cass told me about your embroideries, she said to Della. Can I see some? Della reluctantly showed some of her work. Natalie examined them with professional attention, but also with something that seemed like distrust. They're interesting, she commented. How much do you charge for a piece like this? It depends on the size, the complexity. But how much, approximately? Della mentioned values that were negligible compared to what works of art cost in big cities. Natalie exchanged a significant look with Cass. After they left, Della was agitated. There was something in Cass's sister's attitude that had made her uncomfortable. Grandma, why did you act different after that woman came here? Iris asked. Because she didn't like us. How do you know? Life experience, my flower. Some people look at us like we're inferior. On the way back to the city, Natalie wasted no time in questioning her brother. Cass, what exactly are you doing? Helping 2 people who needed help. And what's your real interest in this situation? There's no interest. Of course there is. You don't do anything without thinking about the return. Natalie studied him. Unless you're getting emotionally attached. Cass remained silent. But his sister had touched on something that he himself didn't want to admit. Yes, he was getting attached to Della's determination, to Iris's bright intelligence, to the simplicity and authenticity that he hadn't found in his life for years. Cass, you need to be careful, Natalie continued. People like these can take advantage of your generosity. What if the girl gets too attached to you? What if the grandmother thinks she's entitled to more than you're offering? They're not like that. How can you be sure? You've only known them for a few weeks. Natalie's words planted seeds of doubt in Cass's mind. Was he being naive? Was his loneliness making him make dangerous emotional decisions? Meanwhile, in the rural house, Della was also full of doubts. The visit from Cass's sister had made it clear that not all the family approved of their presence there. What if Natalie convinced Cass to change his mind? What if all that kindness was just temporary? That night, Iris woke up from a nightmare and found her grandmother still awake, looking out the window. Grandma, are we going to have to leave? Della hugged her granddaughter, trying to hide her own tears. I don't know, my flower. I don't know. What neither of them knew was that at that very moment, in his luxurious house on the other side of the property, Cass was also awake, questioning himself about the feelings he had developed for that small, unlikely family, and about the consequences of his decisions. The following days brought a subtle but perceptible change in Cass's behavior. His visits became less frequent, and when he did appear, he seemed distant, preoccupied. Della immediately noticed the difference, and her anxiety increased. Iris, with the sensitivity of children, also realized that something had changed. Grandma, why doesn't Mr. Cass come to play with me anymore? She asked one afternoon, looking out the window in the hope of seeing the familiar car coming up the dirt road. Maybe he's busy with his work, Della replied, but inside she felt a tightness in her chest. The words of Cass's sister echoed in her mind, confirming her worst fears. It was then that Natalie returned, this time alone. She arrived on a Tuesday morning when Iris was playing in the yard with her collection of stones and Della was sewing on the porch. The sound of the expensive car coming up the road made Della's heart race. "Good morning," Natalie said, getting out of the car with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Can we talk?" Della stood up slowly, already sensing trouble. "Sure." "It's better if we talk alone," Natalie said, looking significantly at Iris. "Iris, go play inside for a little while," Della asked. When they were alone, Natalie went straight to the point. "I came to talk about my brother. Is he okay?" "Physically, yes, but I'm worried about him emotionally." Natalie sat down in a chair on the porch without being invited. Since his wife died, Cass has completely closed himself off. Work has become his only obsession. And what's the problem? The problem is that now he's getting too attached to you, especially to the girl. Natalie's eyes narrowed. And that can be dangerous for everyone involved. Della felt a fury growing in her chest. Dangerous? My granddaughter is an innocent child. Exactly. A child who may get hurt when my brother realizes that he's trying to replace the family he lost with a temporary situation. The words hit Della like slaps. What exactly are you insinuating? I'm not insinuating anything. I'm being clear. Natalie leaned forward. Cass is a very rich man, a widower, lonely. You're a woman in a vulnerable situation with a child to raise. It's natural that connections form. Do you think I'm trying to take advantage of your brother? I think you're in a situation that can easily be misinterpreted on all sides. Della stood up, trembling with indignation. We didn't ask for anything beyond a temporary roof. And if your brother has been kind to us, it's because he's a good person. My brother is a good person. That's exactly why I'm trying to protect him. Natalie also stood up, and you too, because when this fantasy ends, who's going to suffer the most is you. At that moment, Iris appeared at the door, sensing the tension in the air. Grandma, is everything okay? Everything's fine, my flower, Della said, trying to control her voice. Natalie looked at the girl with an expression that mixed pity and calculation. She's a beautiful child. She deserves stability, doesn't she? Yes, she does, Della replied dryly. Then I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Natalie headed to the car for the good of everyone. After she left, Della was devastated. All her insecurities and fears came to the surface. Maybe Natalie was right. Maybe she was allowing Iris to get too attached to Cass, creating expectations that would inevitably be frustrated. Grandma, are you crying? Iris asked, tugging at her grandmother's skirt. No, my flower. I'm just thinking. Thinking about what? About many things. Meanwhile, at his mining company in the city, Cass faced pressures of another kind. The partners had called an emergency meeting, worried about rumors circulating about his involvement with a family in need. Cass, we need to talk about your public image, said Rodolfo Medeiros, the main partner, a burly man of 60 who came from a traditionally wealthy family in the region. There are rumors that you are involved in a compromising situation. What kind of situation? An elderly woman and a child, living on your property. Medeiros leaned over the conference table. People are talking, Cass, and not in a positive way. People always talk, Cass replied, trying to stay calm. But this time they're questioning your judgment, your ability to make rational decisions for the company. Another partner, Dr. Anthony Silva, spoke up. Some important clients are worried. Worried about what? About your emotional stability, Medeiros said brutally. A man who suddenly starts adopting needy families may not be seen as someone reliable to make business decisions. Cass felt the anger rising. I'm helping 2 people who needed help. I don't see a problem with that. The problem is that you're mixing personal life with business. Your property is part of the company's assets. And what if something goes wrong? What if these people get hurt there? What if they claim rights? That's ridiculous. It's precaution, Dr. Silver corrected. Cass, we all respect you here. But since the loss of Myrtes, you haven't been yourself. Maybe it's time to seek professional help instead of trying to fill emotional voids with strangers. The partner's words echoed those of his sister, creating a storm of doubts in Cass's mind. Was he really making irrational emotional decisions? Was he harming his company, his reputation, for a sentimental impulse? That afternoon, he drove to the rural property, but didn't stop at the house where Della and Iris lived. Instead, he went straight to his main house, watching the small white house where they lived from a distance. Through the window, he could see Iris playing alone in the yard and Della sitting on the porch, sewing with mechanical movements. There was something in the scene that touched him deeply, but the voices of Natalie and the partners kept echoing in his head. Emotional stability, compromising situation, fantasy. Cass stood watching for almost an hour, torn between the desire to go down and talk to them and the fear of making a terrible mistake. It was then that he saw Iris look in the direction of his house and wave, even though she couldn't see him clearly through the distance. The girl's innocent gesture was like a stab in his heart. She was waiting for him, trusting him, and he was there, hidden, questioning feelings that seemed so natural. That night, back in the city, Cass called Natalie. "You were right," he said, his voice heavy with weariness. "About what?" "About me getting too attached, about the situation being complicated." Natalie sighed with relief. "So you're going to end it?" "I don't know how. They have nowhere to go." "Cass, you can help them in other ways. Financially, from a distance. You don't have to get emotionally involved. It's just what? They make me feel alive again, like I'm a normal person, not just a businessman." "You are a normal person, but you need to deal with your pain in a healthy way, not by trying to create a substitute family." After hanging up, Cass was lost in thought. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe he was projecting his emotional needs onto a situation that should be only charitable and temporary. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, Della was making a decision that would change everything. After a whole day tormented by Natalie's words, she had decided that it was time to protect Iris from the inevitable disappointment that was to come. It was time to leave before than to hurt them even more. Della spent the whole night awake, mentally, organizing what she would take and what she would leave behind. At 5 in the morning, she began to silently pack her belongings in the same black bag she had carried the day she met Cass. Iris was still sleeping soundly, oblivious to the emotional storm that was ravaging her grandmother. The decision to leave hurt like an open wound, but Della was convinced that it was best for everyone, especially for Iris, who had become so attached to Cass and that temporary life of stability. Better to cut the tie now, before the pain became unbearable. "Grandma, why are you packing our things?" Iris asked, waking up and finding her grandmother folding her few clothes. "We need to leave, my flower." "Leave? Why?" Iris's eyes immediately filled with tears. "Did we do something wrong?" "No, we didn't do anything wrong." Della knelt down to her granddaughter's height, holding her small hands. "But our stay here was always temporary. It's time to move on with our lives." "But I like it here. What about Mr. Cass? Won't he be sad?" "Mr. Cass has his life and we have ours." Iris began to cry, the desperate cry of a child who doesn't understand the complexities of the adult world. "I don't want to leave. This is our home." "This isn't our home, Iris. It never was." The words came out harsher than Della intended, hurting her as much as the girl. As they finished packing their few things, Della left a letter on the kitchen table. She had written and rewritten it several times, trying to find words that explained her gratitude without seeming ungrateful. Her decision without seeming abrupt. Mr. Cass, thank you so much for everything you've done for us. You have a generous heart, but it's time for us to go our own way. Please don't look for us. It's better this way. Della and Iris. Carrying the heavy bag and holding Iris's hand, who was sobbing softly, Della began to walk down the dirt road. The morning sun was rising, painting the sky with golden hues, but she could only see the uncertainty of the future. They hadn't walked even half a mile when they heard the familiar sound of Cass's car behind them. Della quickened her pace, but it was useless to try to escape. The car stopped beside them, and Cass got out with a confused and worried expression. "Della, what are you doing?" "Moving on with our lives," she replied without stopping. "But why? Did something happen?" Iris let go of her grandmother's hand and ran to Cass, hugging his legs. "Mr. Cass, Grandma said we have to leave. Tell her we can stay." Cass's heart broke seeing the girl's despair. He picked her up and turned to Della. "Please, explain to me what happened. Your sister visited me yesterday." The revelation hit Cass like a punch. "Natalie, what did she say?" "The truth, that we're in a situation that doesn't belong to us, that Iris is getting too attached, and when you get tired of us, she'll suffer." "I would never get tired of you. Everyone gets tired, Mr. Cass. And when that happens, I prefer it to be now, before my granddaughter suffers more." Cass put Iris down and approached Della. She had no right to interfere. She had the right to protect her brother, just as I have the duty to protect my granddaughter. "What if I say I don't want you to leave?" "I'd say that's just an impulse. As your sister said, a fantasy to fill a void." Natalie's words coming out of Della's mouth hurt more than Cass expected. Was that really it? A fantasy, a substitute for the family he had lost? "Go back home," he said finally. "At least for today. Let's talk about this properly." "There's nothing to talk about." "Yes, there is. There's a lot." He looked at Iris, who was watching the discussion with frightened eyes. "At least for the girl, she doesn't deserve to be dragged down the roads in a decision made on impulse." Della hesitated. The walk under the hot sun was already tiring Iris, and she really didn't have a clear destination in mind. Maybe he was right about allowing a proper conversation. All right, but only for today. Back at the house, Cass made coffee while Iris, emotionally exhausted, fell asleep on the sofa. Della and he sat at the kitchen table, the farewell letter still there, like a silent accusation. "Why did my sister do that?" Cass asked. "Because she cares about you. And she's right about several things she said." "Like what?" "That you're trying to replace the family you lost. That you're getting attached out of loneliness, not for other reasons." Cass was silent for a long moment. What if it's true? What if I really am doing that? Then it's better to stop now before someone gets hurt. What if it isn't? What if what I feel for you is genuine? How can you be sure? How can you be sure it isn't? The question caught Della off guard. In recent weeks, she had also developed feelings of gratitude, yes, but also of genuine affection. She saw how Cass played with Iris, how interested he was in her embroideries, how he seemed to find peace in that simple life. "Because people like you don't mix with people like us," she said finally. "What people like me? Rich, important, with responsibilities. And what people like you? Poor, without formal education, with nothing to offer besides problems." Cass stood up abruptly. "Is that what you really think?" "It's reality. The reality is that in recent weeks I've felt more alive than in the last 5 years. The reality is that Iris makes me laugh in a way I had forgotten was possible. The reality is that you've inspired me with your strength, your dignity, your talent, Mr. Cass. And the reality is that my sister and my partners are so concerned with appearances and social conventions that they can't see that maybe, just maybe, the best things in life don't come wrapped in money and status. Della looked at him in surprise. It was the first time she had seen him so emotional, so human. But they're not wrong about one thing, he continued. I'm being selfish. I'm thinking about what you mean to me without fully considering what's best for you. And what would be best for us? I don't know. Stability, financial security, a life without depending on the generosity of others. And can you offer that? Cass stopped, realizing that he had reached a crucial point in the conversation. What exactly was he offering? Temporary charity, an unofficial family relationship, some kind of long-term commitment. I can offer partnership, he said slowly, as if discovering the answer as he spoke. You have a talent that can be turned into self-sufficiency. Iris has an intelligence that deserves to be developed. I have resources and connections. Partnership in what? In a project I've been thinking about. A cooperative of local artisans, cultural preservation with financial return. You wouldn't be dependents, you'd be partners. It was the first time Cass had fully verbalized the idea that had been germinating in his mind, and as he spoke, he realized that it made sense not only emotionally, but also practically. Della watched him in silence, processing the proposal. Would it be possible, or would it just be a more elaborate form of disguised charity? And your family, your partners, what would they say about that? They'd say I'm crazy, and maybe I am. At that moment, Iris woke up and approached them, still sleepy. Grandma, are we going to stay? Della looked at her granddaughter, then at Cass, then at the hands calloused from a lifetime of work. For the first time in decades, someone was offering not just help, but a chance to rebuild a life with dignity. I don't know, she said honestly. I need to think. The next 3 days were of intense reflection for everyone involved. Della had agreed to stay temporarily to think about Cass's proposal, but the tension was palpable. Iris felt the uncertainty in the air and had become more clingy, as if she feared that her grandmother might disappear at any moment. Cass, in turn, faced increasing pressure. Natalie appeared almost daily, sometimes with rational arguments, sometimes with veiled threats about questioning his ability to manage the business. The company's partners also intensified their surveillance, questioning every decision he made, and hinting that it might be time for him to take a vacation to recover. It was on a Thursday afternoon that everything changed again. Cass had left to resolve issues at the company, leaving Della and Iris alone, when 2 cars arrived at the property. From the first car, Natalie got out, accompanied by a man Della didn't know, Dr. Anthony Silva, a psychiatrist and partner at the company. From the second car came Rodolfo Medeiros and his wife, Carmen, an elegant woman of 55 known for leading the social activities of the local elite. Good morning, Natalie said, forcing a smile. We'd like to talk to you. Della immediately went on alert, holding Iris's hand tightly. Mr. Cass isn't here. Actually, we want to talk specifically to you, said Dr. Silva, introducing himself. I'm a psychiatrist and Cass's partner. We're concerned about him. In what sense? He hasn't been himself since you arrived, Carmen Medeiros interjected. Neglecting business, making emotional decisions. It's not the typical behavior of someone balanced. Della felt her blood boil. Mr. Cass has always been very kind and rational with us. Exactly the problem, said Dr. Silva. A man who lost his wife tragically and closed himself off emotionally. For 5 years suddenly becomes kind and rational with strangers. It's a worrying pattern. We want to help you too, said Natalie, changing tactics. "I brought some proposals." She held out an envelope to Della. "There's a sum of money in there. Enough for you to settle in another city, far from here. We also have contacts in Columbus who can arrange work for you." Della looked at the envelope as if it were poisonous. "In exchange for what?" "For leaving. Today, discreetly without saying goodbye to Cass," said Rodolfo Medeiros. "It would be better for everyone." "Including Iris," added Carmen. "A child shouldn't get used to a standard of living that can't be maintained." Iris hid behind her grandmother, frightened by the poorly disguised hostility of those elegant people. Della pulled her closer, feeling a fury growing in her chest. "And if we refuse, then we'll have to take more drastic measures," said Dr. Silva. "As partners, we have the right to question Cass's mental sanity. A man who houses strangers on company properties, who talks about creating cooperatives without economic viability, who gets emotionally attached inappropriately, well, that can be interpreted as mental instability." The threat was clear. Della realized that they weren't just trying to separate her from Cass. They were willing to destroy him, if necessary. "You do that to him? We do that for the company," Rodolfo corrected, "and for the employees who depend on it. Cass built an empire, but now he's risking everything for an emotional whim." "It's not a whim," Della said quietly. "No?" asked Natalie. "Then explain to me what it is. A rich, widowed, lonely man suddenly becomes interested in an older woman and a needy child. If it's not misguided charity or emotional instability, what is it?" Della was silent because she didn't know how to explain what had grown between them. How to describe the way Cass looked at Iris, the way he was genuinely interested in her. Embroideries, the peace he seemed to find in that simple life. "You see," said Carmen, pointing to Della's silence, "not even she can explain it, because deep down she knows it's an artificial situation." At that moment, Iris broke free from her grandmother and planted herself in front of the visitors with the desperate courage of children. "You're bad people," she shouted, tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Cass is good. To us, he likes Grandma's embroideries and plays with me and never yells." The girl's outburst created a moment of embarrassing silence. Dr. Silva crouched down to her height, assuming a tone that was intended to be gentle. "No one is saying, 'He's bad, little one.' We're saying he's confused, and sometimes when adults are confused, they make promises they can't keep." "He didn't make promises," Iris replied. "He was just our friend." "And if he stops being your friend? If he suddenly decides he doesn't want you living here anymore?" The cruel question planted a seed of fear in Iris's heart that was exactly what Dr. Silva intended. The girl looked at her grandmother with frightened eyes. "Grandma, can he do that?" Della hugged her granddaughter, furious with the manipulation. "Don't worry about that now." "But he can," Carmen insisted, "because this house, this land, everything belongs to him. And when he gets tired of this phase, you'll have to leave anyway." "Unless," said Natalie, returning to the envelope, "you accept our offer. Enough money to start a new life, far from here, far from all this confusion." Della looked at the envelope again. The amount had to be considerable. People like that didn't skimp when they wanted something. It would be enough to rent a small house, settle down, give stability to Iris. "How long do I have to decide?" "Until Cass gets back," said Dr. Silva. "If he finds you here still, we'll assume you've refused the offer and we'll move on to other measures." "What other measures?" "A mandatory psychiatric evaluation," he said coldly. "As a partner and professional in the area, I can request that based on legitimate concerns about his behavior." The threat was devastating. Della knew that regardless of the outcome of such an evaluation, the scandal would be enough to destroy Cass's reputation, and he didn't deserve that for being kind to them. After the visitors left, Della was left alone with Iris, the envelope weighing in her hands like lead. The girl was visibly shaken, asking questions that Della didn't know how to answer. Grandma, is Mr. Cass going to stop liking us? I don't know, my flower. I don't want to leave. I know. Then why do we have to go? How to explain to a 6-year-old the social complexities, the class differences, the power of money and influence? How to explain that sometimes doing the right thing means accepting the pain? Because sometimes good people can't be together, she said finally. Why? Because the world won't let them. An hour later, Cass arrived and immediately realized something was wrong. Della was sitting on the porch, the envelope beside her, while Iris played too quietly in the yard. What happened? Della told him about the visit, about the threats, about the proposal. As she spoke, she saw Cass's expression change from worry to indignation, and finally to a cold fury that she had never seen before. They have no right to do this, he said when she finished. Yes, they do. They're your partners, your family, and they can destroy you if they want to. Let them try. Mr. Cass, they're serious. A psychiatric evaluation, questioning your ability. It could ruin everything you've built. And you think I should care? The question surprised Della. Of course you should. It's your life, your work. My life has changed in recent weeks. My work, well, I've discovered that maybe it's not as important as I thought. Cass sat down next to her, on the porch, watching Iris in the yard. They're right about one thing. I'm making emotional decisions. But for the first time in 5 years, I feel like I'm alive to make them. What if you lose everything? Then we'll build something new, together. The statement was both comforting and terrifying. Della looked at the envelope, then at Cass, then at Iris. 3 destinies depended on the decision she would make in the next few hours. Della's decision came with the sunrise. She had spent the night awake, watching Iris sleep and weighing every word spoken by the visitors the day before. At dawn, she picked up the envelope and placed it on the kitchen table, unopened. Her choice was made. "Good morning," said Cass, appearing at the kitchen door at 7 in the morning. He carried a bag with fresh bagels and a determined expression that she hadn't seen before. "Good morning. I've made my decision." Cass stopped, bracing himself for the worst. And what is it? We're not going to accept their money, but we're also not going to stay here knowing that our presence could destroy your life. Della, let me finish. She took a deep breath. If you really believe in this cooperative idea, if you really think I can contribute something besides problems, then let's try. But far from here, in another place where your family and your partners can't use our relationship against you. The proposal caught Cass off guard. Go where? I don't know. You're the one who knows the business world. You must know where a craft cooperative would have the best chance of succeeding. Cass was silent, processing the suggestion. It was a solution he hadn't considered, but that made sense on several levels. What about Iris? Would she be willing to leave this place that has become important to her? Iris will adapt. Children are stronger than we imagine. At that moment, Iris herself appeared, still in her pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Cass. Grandma said we're going on a trip." "Maybe," he replied, looking at Della. "To a place where you can go to school, where your grandmother can work with her embroideries, where we can start something new." "And are you coming with us?" "Yes, I am." Iris's face lit up. "Then it's okay. Can I take my stone collection?" The simplicity of the child's acceptance contrasted with the complexity of the adult situation. During breakfast, Cass and Della discussed possibilities. He mentioned a town upstate New York where he knew people interested in cultural projects, where the cost of living was lower and the receptivity to artisanal initiatives was greater. "It would be a complete fresh start," he said, "for all of us. What about your business here? I'm going to sell my share of the company. The partners will be happy to get rid of me and my emotional decisions." "Mr. Cass, are you sure about this? It's a lot of money, a lot of power." Della, in the last 5 years I've built a fortune, but I've lost the ability to live. In the last few weeks I've learned to live again. What do you think is worth more? Before she could answer, they heard the sound of cars approaching. Through the window, they saw not only Natalie and Dr. Silva returning, but also an ambulance and 2 uniformed men that Della couldn't identify. They brought reinforcements, Cass murmured, his jaw tightening. Natalie got out of the car with a triumphant expression. Beside her, Dr. Silva carried a briefcase of documents. The uniformed men were technicians from the psychiatric hospital in Columbus. "Cass!" Natalie shouted, walking purposefully towards the house. "We need to talk." "Grandma, who are those people?" Iris whispered, frightened. "People who don't want us well," Della replied, pulling the girl closer. Cass went out to meet his sister in the yard, leaving Della and Iris watching through the window. "Natalie, what does this mean?" he asked, pointing to the technicians. "It means you missed the opportunity to resolve this discreetly," she replied. "Since you didn't accept our offer yesterday, we had to take legal action." Dr. Silva approached with the documents. "Cass, based on reports of erratic behavior, social isolation followed by inappropriate attachment, and questionable financial decisions, we obtained a court order for a mandatory psychiatric evaluation." "This is ridiculous." "It's necessary," Natalie corrected. "You're clearly not thinking straight. A man who abandons a thriving company for sentimental fantasies needs professional help." "I haven't abandoned anything." "Not yet, but we know about your plans." She looked significantly at the house where Della and Iris were watching. "Sell your share of the company. Throw away everything you've built. Why? For 2 strangers who appeared in your life a few weeks ago." Cass realized that someone had told them about his plans. Maybe a company employee, maybe someone who had overheard phone conversations. It didn't matter how they found out. What mattered was that now they had additional ammunition against him. "My personal life is none of your business." "Your personal life affects the company," said Dr. Silva, "and as partners, we have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the interests of everyone involved." One of the hospital technicians approached. "Mr. Drummond, you need to come with us for a routine evaluation. It won't take long." "What if I refuse?" "The order is mandatory," replied Dr. Silva. "Resisting will only make the situation worse." Cass looked at the house, where he could see Iris's frightened face in the window. He realized that he was in a carefully planned trap. If he resisted, they would use that as additional evidence of instability. If he went voluntarily, he would be separated from Della and Iris for days, maybe weeks. "At least let me say goodbye." "It's not necessary," Natalie said quickly. "The less drama, the better for everyone." "Especially for the child," added Dr. Silva. "Prolonging a situation that's going to end anyway will only cause more trauma." At that moment, Della came out of the house with Iris, walking purposefully to where the men were. "Mr. Cass doesn't need to go anywhere," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "Lady, this is none of your business," replied Dr. Silva. "Yes, it is, because you're using our presence here as justification to question his sanity." "Exactly," said Natalie. "And now that you recognize that, I hope you do the right thing." Della looked at Cass, then at Iris, who clung to her skirt with tear-filled eyes. In her years of life, she had learned that sometimes the only way to protect those we love is to make painful sacrifices. "All right," she said finally. "We'll leave." "Della, no," Cass protested. "It's better this way." She turned to Natalie. "But with one condition. You leave him alone. No psychiatric evaluation, no questioning his ability. We leave, and you forget this situation ever existed." Dr. Silva and Natalie exchanged glances. It was exactly what they wanted, but they distrusted the ease of the victory. "And how do we know you won't come back in a few months?" Natalie asked. Della picked up the envelope that was on the kitchen table and handed it to her. unopened. I accept the money, but not to leave silently, to guarantee that we'll never approach him again. Della, what are you doing? Cass asked, horrified. What I need to do, she replied, tears beginning to stream down her face. Iris began to cry, realizing that something terrible was happening. Grandma, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave Mr. Cass. The sound of the girls crying broke the hearts of everyone present, including some of the antagonists. But Natalie remained firm. It's better this way, little one. You're going to have a better life far from here. I'm not, Iris shouted, running to Cass and clinging to his leg. Mr. Cass, don't let us leave. Cass picked her up, his own tears beginning to fall. I don't want you to go. But we have to, said Della, approaching to take Iris. To protect you. I don't need protection. Yes, you do. And we need a life that is our own, not dependent on the kindness of others. The statement hurt Cass more than any threat from the partners. He realized that Della was trying to protect him, but also that she genuinely believed that they didn't belong in that world. 1 hour, said Dr. Silver, consulting his watch, to say goodbye and pack your things. After that, we expect you to leave the property. And if Mr. Cass tries to follow them, Natalie asked, then we'll do the psychiatric evaluation, replied Dr. Silver. And this time, it will be much more rigorous. As the antagonists moved away to give them privacy, Cass, Della, and Iris stood alone in the yard, hugging and crying, knowing that they had only 60 minutes to say goodbye to a family that had formed in a few weeks, but seemed to have lasted a lifetime. The hour they were granted passed like minutes. Della quickly packed her few belongings in the same black bag she had carried the day they arrived, while Iris refused to let go of Cass's hand. The girl cried convulsively, not understanding why the adults were separating her newly formed family. I don't want to go, Grandma. Please, don't take me away from here, Iris pleaded, clinging to Cass as if he were her only salvation. Cass tried to be strong for the girl, but inside he felt as if they were tearing pieces from his heart. Iris, you're going to be okay. Your grandmother will take care of you, and you're going to have a new, beautiful house. I don't want a new house. I want to stay with you. And I want you to stay with me, too, he replied, his voice choked with emotion. But sometimes adults need to do things they don't want to do to protect the people they love. Della watched the scene with a broken heart. She saw the genuine love between Cass and Iris, felt the pain of separation in her own skin, but remained firm in her conviction that she was doing the right thing. People like them didn't belong in that world of wealth and power. Mr. Cass, she said, approaching, thank you for everything. You gave us more than shelter. You gave us dignity, hope. We'll never forget. Della, it's not too late to change our minds. We can face this together. No, they're many, they're powerful, and we're just simple people who appeared in your life by chance. It wasn't chance, Cass said firmly. It was destiny. Destiny is everyone in their place, she replied, more to convince herself than him. Natalie approached, ostentatiously consulting her watch. Time's up. You need to leave now. 5 more minutes, Cass pleaded. No, it's been too long. She nodded to the hospital technicians. If you don't leave now, we'll consider that you're not fulfilling the agreement. Della picked up Iris, even as the girl struggled and screamed. Let's go, my flower. We need to go. No, no, Mr. Cass, help me. Don't let them take me away. Iris's cries echoed through the rural property like a lament, touching even some of the antagonists present. Carmen Medeiros looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the scene. Cass walked beside them to the gate, carrying the bag with Della's belongings. At the gate, there was a taxi waiting, courtesy of Natalie, who wanted to make sure they really left. Where to? Asked the driver. Della looked at the envelope she was holding. Inside was enough money for a new life, but also the certainty that she would never see the man who had brought light to their existences. "Bus station," she said simply. "Della," Cass called out one last time. "If you change your mind, if you need anything—" "We're not going to change our minds," she said, trying to sound convincing. "Goodbye, Mr. Cass. Mr. Cass, Mr. Cass!" Iris screamed from the taxi window, reaching out to him. Cass stood at the gate, watching the taxi drive away down the dusty road, carrying with it the two people who had become his family. When the vehicle disappeared around the curve, he turned to find Natalie and Dr. Silva watching him with satisfied expressions. "It was the best for everyone," said Natalie. "Was it?" Cass glared at her with a coldness she had never seen before. "Destroying a family, blackmailing innocent people, threatening with psychiatric confinement, is that the best for everyone? You'll thank us later." "I will never forgive you for this." Dr. Silva approached. "Cass, I know you're hurt now, but in time you'll realize that we did this for your own good." "For my own good, or for the good of the company's profits?" "For both," replied Rodolfo Medeiros, who had remained silent until then. "You were risking everything for an emotional whim." "That wasn't a whim. It was the first real thing that had happened in my life in 5 years. It was fantasy," Natalie insisted. "You were trying to replace Mirtes and the family you never had with inadequate substitutes." The mention of his dead wife hit Cass like a punch. "Don't mention Mirtes. You have no right." "Yes, I do. Because I'm your sister, and I know she wouldn't approve of what you were doing." "You don't know anything about what Mirtes would approve of." That night, Cass was alone in the rural house, surrounded by memories of Della and Iris. The kitchen table still had crumbs from the cookies they had eaten together at breakfast. Iris's room still smelled of the baby soap he had bought for her. In the yard, the collection of pretty stones that the girl had formed remained untouched, like a monument to interrupted happiness. While meanwhile, Della and Iris were in a cheap motel in Columbus, waiting for the next day's bus to a town upstate New York that Della had chosen randomly on the map. Iris cried softly in bed, hugging a teddy bear that Cass had given her. "Grandma, why can't we go back to him?" "Because we can't, my flower. But he likes us. I saw it in his eyes." "I know he does. But liking isn't enough." "Why not?" How to explain to a 6-year-old the social complexities that determined who could stay together and who should be separated? How to explain that love doesn't always conquer practical obstacles? Because the world is complicated. "I hate the complicated world," Iris murmured, hiding her face in the pillow. "Me too, my flower. Me too." The next morning, Cass woke up with a determination that had been absent in recent weeks. He put on his best suit, combed his hair carefully, and drove to the company. His first stop was Rodolfo Medeiros' office. "I want to sell my share of the company," he announced without preamble. Rodolfo looked up from his papers in surprise. "I thought we had resolved this yesterday." "You resolved it. I didn't." "Cass, be reasonable. The women are gone. You can go back to normal. This is my normal life now. I want to sell." "Why? For revenge?" "For freedom." Dr. Silva entered the office at that moment. "I heard raised voices. Any problem?" "Cass wants to sell his share in the company," Rodolfo informed him, "because of what happened yesterday. That's an emotional reaction, not a rational decision." "It's the most rational decision I've made in years," Cass replied. "I've discovered that I've built a gilded cage, and now I want to get out of it." "And do what? Run after those women?" "Maybe, or maybe build something new, something that has meaning beyond profit." Rodolfo and Dr. Silva exchanged worried glances. They had thought that with the departure of Della and Iris, Cass would return to normal. Instead, he seemed more determined than ever to change his life. "Cass," said Dr. Silva carefully, "maybe you should think better about this. making such a drastic decision so soon after an emotional trauma. It wasn't trauma. It was awakening. Whatever it was, don't make irreversible decisions in the heat of the moment. Cass smiled, but it was a smile without joy. You've spent weeks telling me that I was making irrational emotional decisions. Now that I'm making a purely practical and rational decision, it's also wrong. This isn't practical or rational. Yes, it is. I'm selling a business that no longer brings me satisfaction to people who clearly want it. More than I do. It's pure market logic. During the following days, while Cass began the process of selling his share in the company, Della and Iris settled in the town of Harmony, upstate New York. They rented a small house in a simple neighborhood, and Della began to look for work. But both were clearly suffering from the separation. Iris had become apathetic, refusing to play, eating little, constantly asking when they would go back home, always referring to Cass's rural property. Della tried to keep busy, but at night, when her granddaughter finally fell asleep, she cried silently, questioning whether she had made the right choice. It was on a Thursday afternoon, exactly 1 week after the separation, that something unexpected happened. Della was in Harmony Town Square with Iris when she saw a familiar man approaching. It was Robert, an old acquaintance from Harmony Creek, who had moved to that town years ago. Della? Della Santos? What a surprise to find you here. Hi, Robert. We moved recently. To Harmony? That's great. And this must be your granddaughter, right? She's grown a lot since the last time I saw her. Iris hid behind her grandmother, still traumatized by recent events. Robert noticed the sadness in the girl and the tension in Della. Is everything all right? You seem down. We're still adjusting. I understand. Moving to a new town is never easy. He looked around. You know, my sister works at City Hall in the culture department. They're always looking for local artisans for community projects. Do you still do those beautiful embroideries? The question caught Della off guard. I do. You should look her up. Sandra Mendez, in the culture department. Mention my name. After Robert left, Della was thoughtful. Maybe it was a sign. Maybe she could really build a new life there based on her own work and talent. But what she didn't know was that at that very moment, 200 miles away, Cass had finalized the sale of his share in the company and was packing his bags, determined to find them and prove that some destinies were too strong to be separated by social conventions. 2 weeks had passed since the separation when Della finally mustered the courage to look for Sandra Mendez at Harmony City Hall. Iris accompanied her, still too silent for a child her age, dragging her feet through the streets of the new city that she couldn't call home. The culture department operated in an old building in the center, with small rooms and worn furniture that contrasted with the vibrant energy of Sandra, a 45-year-old woman with curly hair and a warm smile. You must be Della, she said, standing up as soon as Robert introduced her by phone. My brother told me about your embroideries. Can you show me some? Della timidly opened the bag where she kept her most precious pieces. When Sandra saw the first Richelieu embroidery, her eyes widened in admiration. This is extraordinary. How long have you been doing this kind of work? Since I was a girl. My mother taught me, as her mother had taught her. These techniques are disappearing, said Sandra, examining each detail of the stitches. We have a cultural preservation project here in the city, and you would be perfect to lead workshops. Workshops? To teach other women. We have a group of ladies interested in learning traditional crafts. We pay per teaching hour, and we help sell the pieces at regional fairs. It was exactly the type of opportunity that Della didn't dare to dream. Worthy work based on her skills without depending on anyone's charity. And is there daycare at City Hall? She asked, looking at Iris. Yes, we do. Iris can stay there while you work. For the first time in weeks, Della felt a pang of hope. Maybe she could really build a new life there. When can I start? Tomorrow, if you want. Meanwhile, in Harmony Creek, Cass faced the consequences of his decisions. The sale of his share in the company had caused an earthquake in local business circles. Natalie was furious. The former partners felt betrayed, and high society murmured about his nervous breakdown. "You've completely lost your mind," said Natalie during a tense visit to his apartment in the city. "You threw away a fortune, destroyed professional relationships, and for what?" "To be free," Cass replied, packing his last belongings. "Free to do what? To live like a pauper? To live according to my values, not according to the expectations of others. And what are those values? Running after a woman who doesn't even want to be found." Cass stopped packing and faced his sister. "My values are honesty, loyalty, and protecting the people I love. You forced me to betray all of that. We saved you from making a terrible mistake. You prevented me from being happy." Natalie was silent for a moment, processing the conviction in her brother's voice. For the first time, she began to question whether they had really done the right thing. "What if you can't find them? What if they really don't want to be found? Then at least I will have tried. And what will you live on?" Cass smiled, a genuine smile that Natalie hadn't seen for years. "I'll work. With my hands, with my mind, building something new. Maybe that's exactly what I need." Nah. That afternoon, Cass left Harmony Creek in a simple car that he had bought to replace the luxurious one he had sold, along with everything else. He didn't know exactly where Della and Iris were, but he had some clues. The taxi driver had mentioned the bus station, and employees at the bus station remembered a woman with a child buying tickets to upstate New York. The search took 3 days. Cass visited 5 towns before arriving in Harmony. It was pure luck that led him to them. He saw Iris playing alone in a square while Della talked to other women near a craft stall. His heart leapt at the sight of the girl. She was visibly thinner, less vivacious than before. She played mechanically with some sticks in the dirt, without the spontaneous joy that characterized her. Cass parked the car and walked slowly to the square, trying to decide how to approach. He didn't want to scare Iris or create a public scene. That could embarrass Della. It was Iris who saw him first. She looked up from the sticks and for a moment remained motionless, as if she didn't believe what she saw. Then her face lit up with a joy that he hadn't seen for weeks. "Mr. Cass," she shouted, dropping everything and running towards him. He picked her up, hugging her tightly, feeling the tears running down his face. "Iris, my girl, how you've grown. Did you come to get us? Grandma said I was never going to see you again." "Yes, I did, and I'm not leaving without you." It was then that Della saw him. She was talking to the other artisans about embroidery techniques when she heard Iris's shout. When she turned around and saw Cass holding her granddaughter, she felt like the world was spinning backwards. "Grandma! Grandma!" Iris shouted, waving excitedly. "Mr. Cass came to get us." Della approached slowly, her heart beating unevenly. "How did you find us?" "Looking for days." "Mr. Cass, you shouldn't be here." "Yes, I should. This is exactly where I should be." The other women watched the scene with curiosity, but Della was focused only on the intensity of Cass's eyes. There was something different about him, a determination that she hadn't seen before. "What about your company, your family?" "I sold my share of the company, and as for my family—" He looked significantly at Iris, then at her. "My family is here." "Mr. Cass—" "Della, let me talk, please." She nodded, feeling her legs tremble. "In the last 15 days, I've learned things about myself that I never knew. I've learned that money without purpose is empty, that success without love is failure, and that you two are not a whim or a fantasy. You are my real family." "But the people who said they were wrong, and I was wrong for letting them convince me otherwise." Iris, still in his arms, looked from one adult to the other, trying to understand the conversation. "Grandma, now can we go back home?" "Iris, we are home now," Della said softly. "We have work here. We're adjusting. But I don't like it here. I want to go back to our real home." "The real home wasn't ours, my flower." "Yes, it was. Mr. Cass said so." Cass put Iris down and approached Della. "She's right. It was your home, and it always will be. You don't understand. We can't go back to that life, not after everything that happened. Then let's create a new life. Here, if you want, or anywhere else." "How?" "Together, as a real family. Mr. Cass, you're talking out of emotion. I'm talking out of love." The statement hung in the air between them. It was the first time the word love had been mentioned directly, and its weight was immense. "You don't even know me properly," said Della, fighting against her own emotions. "I know what matters. I know your strength, your dignity, your talent. I know how you love Iris, how you sacrifice for her. I know that you made me remember what it's like to be human. And I know that you are generous, kind, that you have a good heart. But that doesn't mean that we can be happy together." "Why not?" Sandra Mendez, who had observed part of the conversation from afar, approached discreetly. "Della, is everything all right?" "Yes," she replied, trying to regain her composure. "Sandra, this is a friend. Mr. Cass, this is Sandra, who gave me work here." Cass greeted Sandra politely, but his eyes remained fixed on Della. "What kind of work?" "Teaching embroidery to other women. It's a cultural preservation project." "It's exactly the kind of project I thought we could do together." "You thought about that?" "I thought about a lot of things during these 15 days. I thought about how to transform my money into something useful. I thought about how to use my contacts to value traditional art. I thought about how to create something that would give pride to Iris when she grows up." Sandra, realizing that something important was happening, offered to take Iris to play with other children in the square, giving the adults privacy to talk. "Della," said Cass when they were alone, "I sold everything I had to be able to be here. Not out of impulse, but because I finally understood what really matters." "What if you're wrong? What if in a few months you realize that you made a mistake? What if I'm not? What if it's the first truly right decision I've made in 5 years?" Della looked around, at the simple square, at the hard-working people of the small town, at Iris playing happily for the first time in weeks. Then she looked at Cass, seeing in him something she hadn't noticed before. Peace. He seemed at peace with himself in a way he had never shown before. "And what exactly are you proposing?" "That we be a family, officially. That I adopt Iris legally. That we get married. That we build a life based on our values, not on the judgment of others." The proposal was so direct, so definitive, that Della was speechless. It was everything she had secretly desired but never dared to dream. I need to think." "How long do you need?" "I don't know." At that moment, Iris came running back, holding a flower that she had picked. "Mr. Cass, look how pretty. It's for you." He took the flower seriously, as if it were the most precious gift in the world. "Thank you, Iris. It's the most beautiful flower I've ever received. Are you going to stay with us now?" Cass looked at Della, who looked away, still processing everything she had heard. "I'm going to stay in town for a few days," he said finally, "so that your grandmother can think about some important things." "What things?" "Grown-up things." "I hate grown-up things," said Iris, making them laugh for the first time since they had reunited. On that night, Della stayed awake late, watching Iris sleep and thinking about Cass's proposal. Was it possible that true love could overcome all social and economic differences? Was it possible to build a family based on mutual choice instead of conventions? For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that maybe it was. The following days brought a strange but comforting dynamic to the three of them. Cass had rented a room in a simple bed and breakfast in downtown Harmony and spent his days discreetly observing Della and Iris's new routine. He saw how she taught embroidery to other women with patience and passion, how Iris gradually returned to smiling in his presence, how both had adapted to that simpler life. Della, in turn, observed Cass with a new perspective. Without the expensive suits and the atmosphere of wealth, he seemed more human. He wore simple clothes, ate at the same diner as she did, walked through the dusty streets of the town without showing discomfort. It was as if he had really left behind not only the material possessions, but an entire way of being. "Grandma," said Iris one morning as they got ready for another day of work, "why can't Mr. Cass live with us?" "Because the situation is complicated, my flower. But he doesn't have a house now, and our house has room." The house they had rented really had an extra room, small but sufficient. Della had thought about it several times, but offering it to Cass seemed like too big a step. Too fast. "The people in town will talk," she said, more to herself than to Iris. "Talk about what? That it's not right for a man to live with two women without being family." "But he is our family. He said we're his family." Iris's simple logic touched Della deeply. Why should she care what others thought if they considered themselves family? That afternoon, during the break from the embroidery classes, Della had an important conversation with Sandra. "Can I ask you a personal question?" said Sandra as they organized the materials. "Of course. What's the real story between you and that man?" Della told her everything. The meeting in Harmony Creek, the unexpected help, the gradual development of mutual feelings, the pressure from his family, the forced separation, and now the reunion. "And he really sold everything to be here?" "It seems so. Della, in 30 years of working with people, I've learned to recognize true love, and what I saw between you two is real. But the differences—" "What differences?" "He's not rich anymore. You have worthy work now. Iris clearly loves him like a father. Where's the problem?" "People will judge. People always judge. The question is, are you going to live your life based on the fear of other people's judgment?" The question echoed in Della's mind for the rest of the day. At night, when Cass came to have dinner with them, this had become routine. She took courage to bring up the subject. "Mr. Cass, where exactly are you sleeping?" "At the bed and breakfast downtown." "Why? Is it comfortable?" "It's adequate." Iris, who was playing on the floor, looked up. "Mr. Cass, do you want to see my room? It has an extra bed that Grandma said is for visitors." Della turned red. "Iris!" "But it's true. Aren't you a visitor?" Cass smiled. "I'm a very special visitor." "Then you can sleep in the visitor bed." "Iris, it's not how it works," said Della. "Why not?" Cass asked softly. The question caught Della off guard. Why not indeed? He was spending money he didn't have in abundance at a bed and breakfast when there was space in the house. They spent all the time together anyway. Because people will talk. "And that matters to you?" "It always has." "What if it didn't? What if you could decide based only on what you feel, not on what others think?" Della was silent, struggling with decades of conditioning about what was or wasn't appropriate. "Can I think about it?" Of course. 2 days later, something happened that changed the dynamic once again. Della was teaching a group of women when one of them, Joan, a 60-year-old woman known for gossiping, made a comment that chilled Della's blood. "Della, this man who hangs out with you, he's not married, is he?" "No, he's a widower." "Because they're saying around town that he abandoned his family to live with you." "Who's saying that?" "Oh, you know how it is in a small town. People talk. And what exactly are they saying? That he was rich, had a company, and left everything for an older woman. I'm not younger than him. No, but, well, you understand? Rich man, poor woman, child in the middle. People draw conclusions." Della felt the anger rising in her chest. What kind of conclusions? that you took advantage of his situation, that you used the girl to arouse pity, that now you're living at his expense. I work to support myself. I know that, but people don't see it that way. Sandra, who overheard part of the conversation, approached. Joan, I think we should stop this conversation. It's not appropriate. I'm just trying to help, said Joan, feigning innocence, warning about the comments they're making. After Joan left, Sandra hugged Della, who was visibly shaken. Don't pay attention to her. Joan has always been a gossip. But if people are thinking that, Della, you can't live your life trying to control what others think. That night, Della told Cass about the incident. He was furious, but not with her, with the gratuitous cruelty of people who judged without knowing the story. This is exactly what my family said would happen, she said sadly, that people would judge us. And for that we're going to separate again? Are we going to let the ignorance and malice of others destroy our happiness? It's not that simple. Yes, it is. It's exactly that simple. Cass took her hands in his. Della, there's a way to end all this speculation. How? By getting married. The proposal came so directly that Della was speechless. It was the second time he had mentioned marriage, but now it seemed more urgent, more necessary. Mr. Cass, think about it. If we're married, no one can question our motives. Iris would have a legal father. You would have security. I would have a family. What if it doesn't work out? What if it does? Iris, who was pretending to sleep but listening to everything, sat up in bed. Grandma, marry Mr. Cass. Iris, you should be sleeping. But I heard you talking, and I want him to be my real dad. Cass approached the bed and sat on the edge. Iris, are you sure about that? I am. Are you going to protect me when other people say bad things? Always. And are you going to stay with us even when you get old? Especially when I get old. And are you going to teach me things? All the things I know. Iris looked at Della. Grandma, he promised, and Mr. Cass never breaks promises. Della looked at the two of them, the man who had abandoned a life of luxury to be with them, and the girl who had found in him the father she never had. She saw genuine love in both their eyes, saw the possibility of a real family based on choice and mutual affection. I need a few days to think, she said finally. How many days? I don't know, it's a very important decision. It's the most important decision, agreed Cass. That's why it should be based on the heart, not on fear. That night, Della stayed, awake, looking at the stars through the window. She thought about her whole life, the difficulties, the humiliations, the constant fears about the future. Then she thought about the last few weeks in Harmony, the worthy work, the respect she had earned, the joy of Iris. And she thought about Cass, the way he looked at her, how he treated Iris, how he had changed his entire life to be with them. Didn't she deserve at least to try to be happy? The next morning, she woke up with a determination that she hadn't felt for a long time. It was time to stop living in fear and start living with courage. During breakfast, with Iris still in her pajamas and Cass just arrived from the bed and breakfast, she made an announcement that would change everything. I accept. Accept what, Grandma? Asked Iris. I accept to marry Mr. Cass. The silence that followed was interrupted by Iris's cry of joy, who jumped from the chair and hugged both adults at the same time. We're going to be a real family. Cass looked at Della with tears in his eyes. Are you sure? I'm sure that I want to try, and I'm sure that I love you. It was the first time that any of them had pronounced the word love directly. And at that moment, with Iris between them laughing with happiness and the morning sun entering through the window of the simple house, the three knew that some decisions were worth any risk. The preparations for the wedding brought a joy that Della hadn't experienced for decades. Iris was radiant, helping with every detail, from choosing the flowers to deciding on her grandmother's dress. Cass was tireless in resolving the practical matters: documentation, notary, organization of the simple ceremony they had planned. It was during these weeks of preparation that an unexpected discovery would change everything again. Della was organizing her oldest belongings, looking for documents for the wedding, when she found at the bottom of the bag a yellowed folder that she hadn't seen for years. Inside it, there were papers that her mother had kept and that she had never examined carefully. "What's that, Grandma?" asked Iris, seeing her grandmother focused on the old documents. "Old family papers. Your great-grandmother kept everything." Among old birth certificates and faded photographs, Della found something that left her confused: a land deed dated 1952 in the name of her father, Joe Santana. The document was in perfect condition, laminated and carefully stored. "That's strange," she murmured, reading the details. The deed described a property of considerable size in the Harmony Creek region, with specific geographical coordinates and well-defined boundaries. Della had always known that her father had lost land, but she had never seen official documentation about it. When Cass arrived for dinner, she showed him the document. "Do you know these coordinates?" she asked. Cass studied the paper with growing attention. Something about those numbers was familiar. "Can I take this to check tomorrow? I have a surveyor, a friend who can help me locate exactly where these lands are." "Sure, but I don't think it matters. My father lost everything decades ago." "Even so, it's worth checking." The next day, Cass drove to Albany to meet Paul Mendonca, a retired surveyor who had worked in the Harmony Creek region for 40 years. When Paul saw the coordinates, his eyes widened. "Cass, these lands, they're part of your old property." "What do you mean?" "These coordinates correspond exactly to the farm that you bought in 2008, the St. Vincent farm." Cass's world stopped for a moment. The St. Vincent farm was the property where he had built his main house, where Della and Iris had lived temporarily. It was one of the most important acquisitions of his business empire. "That can't be right." "It is. Look here." Paul opened a detailed map of the region. "These coordinates match perfectly, but I bought this land legally. I have all the documentation." "I'm sure you do, but there may have been complications in the property history." Cass spent the rest of the day investigating in the notaries of Harmony Creek. What he discovered left him stunned. The St. Vincent farm had really belonged to Joe Santana until 1958, when it was confiscated for unpaid tax debts. However, the deed that Della possessed was prior to the confiscation and had never been officially invalidated. More importantly, there was a will of Joe Santana, registered in the notary in 1957, leaving all his lands to his daughter Della, then a minor. The will had been ignored during the confiscation process because no one had appeared to claim the hereditary rights. "This means that," began Cass, talking to the notary clerk, "it means that technically Mrs. Della Santos may have legitimate rights to this property. The confiscation was done without considering the existing will." Cass returned to Harmony that night with his head spinning. How to tell Della that the land where she had lived briefly as a dependent of his charity was, in fact, possibly hers by right? He found Della and Iris preparing handmade invitations for the wedding. The domestic scene, so simple and happy, contrasted drastically with the bomb he was about to detonate. "How was your research?" asked Della, without looking up from the embroidery she was doing on an invitation. "Della, I need to tell you something important." The serious tone made her stop her work. "What is it?" "Your father's lands. They still exist." "What do you mean?" Cass told her the whole discovery. The coordinates that corresponded to his old farm, the ignored will, the hereditary rights never claimed. As he spoke, he saw Della's face change from confusion to incredulity, and finally to something that seemed like devastation. Are you saying that the farm where we lived was mine? Possibly, yes. And you knew about this when you offered a shelter? No, of course not. But did you know when you bought the land? I didn't know. The documentation I received only showed the last owner before the sale. Della stood up abruptly, walking to the window. So, during all this time, I was living on land that was mine by right, as if it were your arms. Della, it wasn't like that, wasn't it? I felt humiliated to accept charity, when in fact I was just recovering what was mine. The irony of the situation was devastating. Della remembered the cruel words of Cass's family, the insinuations about her taking advantage of the situation. Now she discovered that, if someone had taken advantage, even if unconsciously, it had been Cass. "Grandma, what's happening?" asked Iris, noticing the tension. "Nothing, my flower. Continue with the invitations." "Della, please, let's talk about this calmly," Cass asked. "Talk about what? About how ironic fate is. About how I spent my life believing that my family had lost. Everything due to incompetence when in fact they were robbed. No one was robbed. It was a bureaucratic error. 50 years of bureaucratic error that cost my family's dignity." Cass realized that he had underestimated the emotional impact of the discovery. For him, it was a complicated legal matter, but solvable. For Della, it was the revelation that a whole life had been based on an injustice. "What do you want to do with this information?" he asked. "I don't know. I need to think." "What about our wedding?" Della was silent for a long moment. "I need to think about that too." The answer hit Cass like a punch. "Why? What changed?" "What changed is that now I don't know what your true feelings are. Do you love me, or do you feel guilty for having bought lands that belonged to my family? How can you think that? How can I not think that? You appeared in my life offering help right after discovering that I was Joe Santana's daughter. Didn't you know who I was from the beginning?" "Della, you're being irrational." "Irrational or finally rational after years of naivety?" Iris began to cry, frightened by the argument. Della immediately knelt beside her granddaughter, hugging her. "Don't fight," the girl pleaded. "Please, don't fight." "We're not fighting, my flower," said Della, trying to calm down. "We're just talking about complicated things." "And are you going to stop getting married?" The innocent question brought reality back to both adults. There was more at stake than their wounded feelings. There was the heart of a child who had found happiness and now saw everything collapsing again. "Iris," said Cass, kneeling beside them, "no matter what happens between me and your grandmother, I will always love you. I will always be here if you need me. But I want you to get married. I want to be a family." "Sometimes things are more uncomplicated than we'd like," said Della softly, "because of old papers. Because of history, of things that happened before you were even born." That night, after Iris finally fell asleep, Della and Cass talked late into the night on the porch of the house. Both were emotionally exhausted, trying to process a discovery that changed the understanding of their entire history. "Della," said Cass finally, "regardless of who legally owns those lands, I want them to be yours. It's not about the lands." "Then what is it about?" "It's about truth. About knowing if what I feel is real or if it's gratitude misinterpreted. About knowing if what you feel is love or guilt." "It's love," he said firmly. "It's always been love." "How can I be sure?" "In the same way that I can be sure of what you feel. By the way we look at each other, how we take care of each other, how we complete each other." Della was silent, observing the stars. "I need time to process all this." "How much time?" "I don't know. Maybe a few days, maybe a few weeks." "What about our wedding?" "Postponed. Until I can separate what is real from what is confusion." Cass nodded, although his heart was breaking. "And If you decide that you can't trust me again, then at least we will have tried to be honest with each other. That night, the two slept separately for the first time since he had arrived in Harmony, each struggling with different demons, but both united by the certainty that, whatever the resolution of that crisis, it would forever define the destiny of all of them. The days that followed were the most difficult since Cass had found Della and Iris again. The atmosphere in the small house was charged with unspoken tension, and Iris, even with her 6 years, felt that something fundamental had changed between the adults she loved. Cass continued to visit daily, but the conversations were formal, careful. Della treated him with politeness, but there was a new distance in her eyes that hurt him deeply. She had cancelled the wedding without setting a new date, returned the simple ring he had bought, and resumed the formal treatment of Mr. Cass. "Why is Grandma sad?" asked Iris one morning as she got ready to go to the City Hall daycare. "She's not sad, my flower. She's just thinking about important things. About the old papers. About many things. And why aren't you going to get married anymore?" Della stopped combing her granddaughter's hair. How to explain to a child that sometimes discovering the truth can be more complicated than living in ignorance? "Because we discovered that our story is more complicated than we thought." "But do you still like each other?" "Yes, we still like each other." "Then why can't you get married anyway?" Iris's innocent question echoed in Della's mind throughout the day. As she taught embroidery to the other women, she found herself thinking about it. Really, why couldn't they get married even with all the complication about the lands? "You're different," commented Sandra during the break, "since you found out about those documents. It's that it changed everything." "Changed what? The love you feel for each other?" "It changed the foundation of everything. Now I don't know if what we feel is real, or if it's guilt, gratitude, confusion." "Della, can I give you some advice?" "Sure. Stop thinking so much and listen to your heart. Do you love that man?" "I do." "Does he love you?" "I think so." "Then the rest is just unnecessary complication." Meanwhile, Cass faced his own demons. He had hired a lawyer specializing in land issues to investigate the legal situation of the lands, determined to resolve the issue in the fairest way possible. But Della's coldness was leaving him desperate. It was on a Thursday afternoon that everything changed again. Iris was in daycare. Della taught embroidery at the community center when an unexpected visitor arrived. Natalie, Cass's sister, had driven to Harmony as soon as she learned, through common acquaintances, about the discovery of the documents and the cancellation of the wedding. She arrived with a triumphant air, as if her pessimistic predictions had been confirmed. "So you really broke up," she said, finding Della in the square after the end of the classes. "We didn't break up, we just postponed the wedding. Because of the lands that belonged to your father." Della was surprised. "How did you know about that?" "Harmony Creek is a small town, and I still have contacts there." Natalie sat on the bench next to Della. "I came to make you a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "My brother is suffering. Even after everything that happened, even after having thrown away a fortune for you, he still loves you. And I also realized some things in recent weeks. Mainly that maybe I was hasty in my judgment about you." The admission surprised Della. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I saw how my brother changed after you separated. He was dead inside for 5 years. You brought him back to life." Della studied Natalie's face, looking for signs of manipulation. But there was something different about the woman, a sincerity that wasn't present before. "And what's your proposal?" "That you resolve this land issue definitively, that you marry my brother, and that you accept my help to create a truly prosperous life for the 3 of you." I don't understand. Cass sold his share of the company, but I still have contacts in the business world. I can help you create a craft cooperative that really works, with a national market. I can help with the legal part of the lands. I can... Why would you do that? Natalie was silent for a moment, because I finally understood that family isn't just blood, it's choice. And the three of you chose each other. That night, when Cass arrived for the daily dinner, Della told him about Natalie's visit. He was surprised by his sister's change of attitude. She really said that? She did, and offered practical help to solve everything. And do you believe her? I don't know. But maybe we should give her a chance. And us. Where do we fit? In? Della looked at Iris, who was playing on the floor with rag dolls that she had received from the other women of the cooperative. The girl hummed softly, creating stories where the dolls were a happy family. Cass, she said, using his name without formality for the first time in weeks. Yes? Can I ask you a question? Of course. If you had never discovered about my father's lands, would you still want to marry me? Yes. If I decided to sue you to recover the lands, would you still love me? Yes. If I left tomorrow and never saw you again, would you be okay? No, I wouldn't be okay ever again. Della nodded, as if the answers confirmed something she already knew. Then I think we're complicating something that should be simple. What do you mean? I mean that maybe Sandra is right. Maybe I should stop thinking so much and listen to my heart. And what is your heart saying? It's saying that I love you, that I want to marry you, that I want us to be a family, regardless of who owns what. The relief on Cass's face was visible. Are you sure? I'm sure of what I feel. And that's what matters. Iris, who had heard part of the conversation, dropped the dolls and ran to the two of them. Are you going to get married again? We are, said Della, smiling for the first time in weeks. And am I going to be Mr. Cass's real daughter? You are, replied Cass, picking her up. And are we going to live all together? We're going to live all together forever, Della promised. On the following Saturday, a meeting took place at the house they had rented. Present were Della, Cass, Iris, Natalie, and Dr. Maurice Santos, the expert lawyer that Cass had hired. The legal situation is complex, but not impossible to solve, explained Dr. Maurice. Based on the documents you brought, Della has legitimate rights over the property, but considering that Cass bought it in good faith and invested significant improvements, the fairest solution would be a partnership. What kind of partnership? Asked Della. You would become official co-owners. The land would return to the Santos name, but Cass would maintain rights over the constructions and improvements he made. And financially? You would divide both. The costs and the profits of any enterprise on the property. Natalie spoke up. What about the craft cooperative we discussed? It could be based on the property, said Dr. Maurice. With Della as artistic director, Cass as administrator, and with legal and financial support through Natalie's contacts. It would be like a family business, said Iris, understanding the situation with the clarity of children. Exactly, agreed Cass. A family business. But first, said Della, looking at Cass, we need to resolve the most important issue. What? When are we getting married? The question brought smiles to everyone present. Natalie, who had spent months trying to separate them, now offered to help organize the wedding. How about in 2 weeks, she suggested. I can bring some relatives from Albany, have a proper party. No, said Della firmly. We don't want a big party. We want something simple with the people who matter. I agree, said Cass. Simple but meaningful. And can it be on our land? Asked Iris. Our land? Repeated Della. Our land, confirmed Cass. From now on, everything that is mine is ours. That afternoon, for the first time in weeks, the three returned to sleep under the same roof. Cass finally accepted the offer to use the extra room. and the small house filled again with the sound of a happy family. Before sleeping, Iris asked a question that perfectly summarized everything they had gone through. "Grandma, now that we're going to be a real family, does that mean that we'll never have to separate again?" "Never again," Della promised. "No matter what happens, no matter what problems arise, we'll never separate again." "Really promise?" "I promise with all my heart." And for the first time since all the confusion had begun, Della knew that this was a promise she could keep. The wedding day dawned clear and sunny, as if even the weather conspired to make everything perfect. Della woke up early, watching Iris still sleeping in the bed next door, and felt a peace that she hadn't experienced for a long time. It wasn't just the typical nervousness of a bride, it was the deep certainty that she was making the right decision. The ceremony would be at 4 in the afternoon at the Harmony Notary, followed by a small celebration at the house they had rented. Xandra had offered to decorate the place with flowers from the forest, and some of the women from the embroidery cooperative had prepared typical snacks from the region. "Grandma, the day has arrived!" exclaimed Iris, waking up and jumping out of bed. "Today you're going to become a real wife, and you're going to become a real daughter," replied Della, hugging her granddaughter. "Are you happy?" "Very happy. I'm going to have a father and mother and grandmother all at the same time." Iris's innocent joy infected any anxiety that Della might feel. During the last few days, the girl had helped in all the preparations with an enthusiasm that deeply touched the two adults. Cass had spent the night at the bed and breakfast, a tradition that Della had insisted on maintaining, despite finding it unnecessary after so many months living together. He arrived at 10 in the morning, bringing a special breakfast and a gift for Iris. "For the most important girl in my heart," he said, handing over a wrapped box. Iris opened it carefully and found a delicate necklace with a bird-shaped pendant. "It's beautiful, just like the little bird's eye. Draw! So you never forget that you can fly wherever you want, but you'll always have a nest to return to." The metaphor touched Della deeply. That's exactly how she felt. Free to dream, but safe in her new family. Around noon, Natalie arrived from Albany bringing two special guests, Dr. Paul, a family-friend lawyer who would serve as a witness, and Donna Hope, an old acquaintance of Della who had worked as a seamstress in Harmony Creek decades ago. "Della, my dear," exclaimed Donna Hope, hugging her with affection. "When Natalie told me you were getting married, I couldn't help but come." "Donna Hope, what a joy to see you." "And this must be the groom," she said, examining Cass with experienced eyes. "Good-looking man, honest eyes, I approve." The direct declaration made everyone laugh, breaking any remaining tension. "And you, my little one," said Donna Hope to Iris, "must be very happy today." "I am. I'm going to get a new dad." "Not new," Cass corrected. "I'm going to be your dad forever." At 2 in the afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived who brought one last emotion before the ceremony. It was Robert, Sandra's brother, accompanied by a white-haired gentleman that Della recognized. "Immediately, Mr. Matthew," she exclaimed, running to hug the man. Matthias Ferreira had been a neighbor of her family in Harmony Creek when she was a child. A simple man who worked as a carpenter and who had always been kind to her and her parents. "Little Della," he said, returning the hug. "I heard you're getting married today, and I couldn't help but come to wish you happiness." "How did you know?" "Robert told me. And he also told me about the documents you found about your father's lands." "Oh, that," said Della, trying to change the subject. "Della, there's something I need to tell you about that," said Mr. Matthew, with a serious expression. "Something I've carried on my conscience for 50 years. Everyone gathered in the small living room, sensing that something important was about to be revealed. Your father, Joe, was my friend, began Mr. Matthew. "When he got sick, he asked me to take care of some important papers. He said that if something happened to him, I should look for you when you grew up." He took a yellowed envelope from his pocket. "I've kept this all these years, waiting for the right moment." Della opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter handwritten by her father, dated 1957. "My dear daughter Della," she read aloud, "if you're reading this, it's because I'm no longer here to take care of you. I want you to know that you've always been my greatest pride. The lands I leave for you aren't just property. They're the guarantee that our family will have dignity. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Always be strong, as your mother taught me to be. With all my love, your father Joe." The silence that followed was charged with emotion. Della cried, holding the letter against her chest, while Cass hugged her and Iris held her hand. "Why did you keep this for so long?" asked Natalie. "Because when Joe died, Della was very young, and her mother was devastated," explained Mr. Matthew. "Then they moved, and I lost contact. I searched for years, but I never managed to find them. And now?" asked Della. "Now I can die in peace, knowing that I fulfilled the promise I made to your father." Cass knelt in front of Della, holding her hands. "Now I understand why our paths crossed. It wasn't chance, it wasn't coincidence. It was so that you could recover what was always yours." "But the lands don't matter anymore," said Della. "What matters is that we're going to build a life together." "The lands do matter," said Iris, with the peculiar wisdom of children, "because now I know where I come from. I come from people who had land, who had dignity." The girl's observation deeply touched everyone present. She had understood something fundamental, that knowing her family history gave her a solid foundation to build her future. At 3:30, the group headed to the notary. Della wore a simple blue dress that she had embroidered especially for the occasion, with delicate flowers on the sleeves. Cass wore a discreet suit, and Iris wore a yellow dress that matched perfectly with the necklace she had won. The ceremony was simple but moving. When the judge asked if Cass accepted Della as his wife, his answer was firm and clear. "I do, to honor, protect, and love for the rest of my life." When it was Della's turn, she looked at Cass with tears in her eyes. "I do, to build a family, based on true love." And when they asked if there was anyone who opposed the marriage, Iris shouted, "I oppose," making everyone laugh. "I oppose the delay. You can kiss right away." The kiss was sweet and full of promises. When they separated, Iris ran to hug both. "Now we're an official family." The party at the house was small, but cheerful. Sandra had decorated everything with wildflowers and fabrics embroidered by the women of the cooperative. There was local music played by fiddlers from the region, and the food, simple but plentiful, prepared with care by the neighbors. During the party, Natalie approached Della. "Can I talk to you in private?" They went out to the small backyard, where the music arrived muffled. "I want to apologize," said Natalie, "for everything I did to separate you, for all the prejudices I showed." "You're already forgiven," replied Della. "You were protecting your brother. I was protecting my own fears, fear of change, fear of losing control." Natalie looked inside the house where Cass played with Iris. "But seeing my brother today, seeing how happy you are together, I realized that I did everything wrong. The important thing is that and everyone understands what really matters. And what is that? Love, family, giving people the chance to be happy." Later, when the guests had left and Iris finally fell asleep, Della and Cass were alone on the porch of the house. It was their first night as husband and wife. But more than that, it was the official start of a journey that they had started months ago. "Can you believe we got here?" asked Cass, hugging his wife. "Sometimes it seems like a dream. Other times it seems like it has always been like this. And now, where do we go from here?" Della smiled. observing the stars in the clear sky of harmony. Now we're going home to our land, and we're going to build something beautiful there. The cooperative? The cooperative, our new house, Iris's future, everything. She turned to him. Cass, I have a confession to make. What? On the day we met, when you stopped to talk to me in the square, I felt something. I didn't know what it was, but I felt that my life was going to change. I felt it too, as if I had found something that I didn't even know I was looking for. And now I know that I've found my family, my home, my future. That night, the three slept in the same house for the first time as an official family. Iris in her room, dreaming of birds flying freely over lands that belonged to her family. Della and Cass in their room, whispering plans for the future they would build together. And for the first time in a long time, all of them knew that they had found not only love, but also the place where they belonged. 6 months after the wedding, life at the St. Vincent farm had transformed in ways that none of the three could have imagined. What was once just the rural property of a lonely businessman now teemed with activity, colors, and life. The Harmony Embroidery Craft Cooperative had become a reality, operating in a new building, erected specifically to house the project. 12 women from the region worked there regularly, learning and perfecting traditional embroidery techniques under Della's guidance. The pieces produced were sold at regional fairs and even online, through a website that Natalie had helped create. "Grandma, look how many orders arrived today," exclaimed Iris, now 7 years old, running home with a stack of letters in her hand. The girl had become the unofficial assistant of the cooperative, helping to organize materials and always bringing creative ideas for new designs. "Where are they from this time?" asked Della, drying her hands on her apron after preparing lunch. "They're from California, Texas, and there's even one from Washington, D.C. Aunt Natalie said it's from a very important store." Cass entered the kitchen at that moment, coming from the cooperative where he had spent the morning helping with administrative matters. His hair was slightly grey from months of working outdoors, and there was a satisfaction in his eyes that had never existed in his days as an urban businessman. "The women are finishing the special order for the hotel in Albany," he reported, kissing Della on the cheek. 40 embroidered placemat sets. The payment will guarantee material for the next 3 months. "What about Iris's new school?" asked Della. "I spoke to the principal this morning. She's adapting very well. The teachers praise her intelligence and creativity." Iris had been enrolled in a private school in Harmony Creek, where she received a quality education while maintaining contact with her local roots. Every morning, Cass took her to the city and picked her up in the late afternoon, a moment they had transformed into a special ritual of conversation and complicity. "And there's news," said Cass, with a mysterious smile. "I received a very interesting call today." "From whom?" "From the Department of Culture. They heard about our project and want to include the cooperative in a national program to preserve traditional craft techniques." Della stopped organizing the letters, surprised. "What does that mean?" "It means official recognition, government, subsidies, and the possibility of expanding the project to other communities." "Really?" asked Iris, jumping with joy. "Very serious. And there's more," continued Cass. "They want to make a documentary about the history of the cooperative, telling how it all began." "Our story," murmured Della. "Our story. The girl who carried a bag of memories, the businessman who discovered that true wealth isn't measured in money, and how an unlikely family created something beautiful from the casual encounter in a dusty square." That afternoon, while Iris played in the yard with the chickens they had raised on the property, Della and Cass walked to the place where it all had started, the small house where they lived temporarily when they first met. The building now served as the archive of the cooperative, keeping documents, samples of old embroideries, and photographs that documented the evolution of the project. But for them, it remained the symbol of how their lives intertwined. Sometimes, "I still don't believe that all this happened," said Della, sitting on the porch where they had had so many important conversations. "Which part specifically?" "In all. In the way you found us, how you decided to help us, how you faced your family, how we discovered about Dad's lands." She paused. "But mostly in how we managed to overcome all the obstacles." "You know what impresses me the most?" said Cass, sitting next to her. "What? How Iris grew. When I met her, she was a child carrying a weight too great for her shoulders. Now she's a confident, happy girl, full of dreams." It was true. Iris had flourished in recent months in surprising ways. Her drawings of birds now showed birds flying freely in open skies, no longer trapped in cages. She spoke openly about wanting to be an embroiderer and businesswoman when she grew up, planned to study at the university, and had developed a natural confidence that enchanted everyone who knew her. "And you know what she told me yesterday?" continued Cass. "What?" "That she wants to have children one day to tell them the story of how Grandma and Grandpa met." "Grandpa?" laughed Della. "Do you like being called Grandpa?" "I like everything that represents family. And Iris made it clear that when she has children, they will call us Grandpa and Grandma." At that moment, they heard Iris's voice calling them from the yard. "Grandma! Daddy, come see!" They ran to where she was, near the flower bed they had planted together. On the ground, there was a small bird with an injured wing. "It fell out of the nest," explained Iris, pointing to a nearby tree. "Can we take care of it until it gets better?" Della and Cass looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. It was like a perfect metaphor for their own lives. Sometimes we fall, sometimes we get hurt, but with care and love, we can fly again. "Of course we can," said Della, kneeling next to her granddaughter. "We'll take care of him together." As the three worked delicately to help the injured bird, a known pickup approached on the road. It was Natalie, who now visited the farm regularly, no longer as an antagonist, but as an integral part of the extended family. "How are my dears?" she asked, getting out of the vehicle with a basket in her hands. "Aunt Natalie," shouted Iris, running to hug her, "we're saving a little bird." "Saving birds," smiled Natalie. "Sounds like family thing." The observation was deeper than it seemed. In recent months, Natalie had become a different person. Working with the cooperative, seeing her brother's genuine happiness, witnessing Iris's growth, all of that had transformed her perspective on what really mattered in life. "I brought news," she said, handing the basket to Della, "and cookies I bought in the town." "What news?" "Rodolfo Medeiros and the other partners of the old company are facing serious problems. It seems that without Cass's strategic vision, business isn't going well." "What does that have to do with us?" asked Cass. "They want to propose a partnership. They want you to come back as a consultant." "I have no interest." "I said you would say that," laughed Natalie. "But the proposal is interesting. They want to invest in the cooperative, transform it into a medium-sized company with you maintaining total control." Della and Cass looked at each other. It was a tempting opportunity, but it also represented a return to the world they had chosen to leave behind. "Let's think about it," said Della finally. "There's no hurry. But you've built something special. Here, maybe it's time to show the world that there's a different way to do business." That night, after Natalie left and Iris fell asleep, Della and Cass talked about the proposal on the porch of the main house, a new construction they had erected in the place where Cass's luxurious residence used to be. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it's not about the money or the growth of the company," she replied thoughtfully. "It's about having the opportunity to prove that it's possible to reconcile financial success with family values and social responsibility." Oh, and would you like to try? I would, but with one condition. What? That our family continues to be the priority, that Iris continues to grow here, surrounded by love and simplicity, that we never lose sight of what really brought us happiness. Promised. And there's one more thing, said Della with a mysterious smile. What? I've been thinking. Iris is growing up, the cooperative is consolidated, our life is stable. And maybe it's time for us to think about expanding our family. Cass looked at her, surprised. Are you saying? I'm saying that there are many children who need love out there, and we have a lot of love to give. The idea of officially adopting other children was something they had discussed vaguely, but now it seemed natural and necessary. Would Iris be happy to have siblings? Asked Cass. Iris has already asked several times when she's going to get siblings to play with. A year later, life at St. Vincent Farm had expanded even further. The Harmony Embroidery Cooperative had become a national reference in traditional crafts. Iris, now 8 years old, studied at a school of excellence but spent every afternoon at the farm, helping with the cooperative's activities and taking care of 2 adopted siblings, Michael, 6, and Anna, 4. The family had grown, the business had prospered, but the essentials remained: love, simplicity, and the certainty that they had built something lasting and meaningful. One Sunday afternoon, while the children played in the yard and Della finished a special embroidery, Cass looked around and felt a deep gratitude for the path that their lives had taken. "What are you thinking?" asked Della, noticing his contemplative expression. "I'm thinking that 2 years ago I was a rich but empty man. Today I'm a prosperous and fulfilled man. What's the difference? The difference is that wealth is having money. Prosperity is having purpose, family, and the certainty that your life makes a difference in the world." At that moment, Iris approached running, holding a sheet of paper. "Dad, Mom, look what I wrote at school." It was an essay entitled "My Family." She had written about the grandmother who raised her with love, the father who chose to love them, the cooperative that showed that work and family could go together, and the siblings they had recently gained. But the last sentence was the one that touched the most. "My family taught me that true love isn't about where you come from, but about where you choose to go together." As the sun set over the lands that now officially belonged to the Santos Drummond family, Della watched her children playing, her husband planning improvements for the cooperative, and felt that she had finally found what she had always sought: a place in the world where she could simply be herself, surrounded by people who loved her unconditionally. The girl who once carried a bag of memories in a dusty square had become a woman who built happy memories every day, and that was the greatest wealth anyone could desire.